So today we will walk through the framework Hibernate. So before diving into the Hibernate, let's understand where Hibernate actually comes in. What is the problem statement that Hibernate is going to solve? So for that, let's understand Hibernate through these diagrams. Whenever we are trying to interact with database, maybe it is of MySQL or Oracle. Basically, we are interacting with SQL databases. So whenever we are interacting with database through our Java program, then we need JDBC API, Java Database Connectivity API, which is provided by the Sun people, Sun Microsystem, and the implementation of JDBC API is given by the driver vendors, which means the interfaces and methods and classes provided by the Java Sun Microsystem of JDBC API is going to get inherited and implemented by the Java vendors. So the JDBC implementation is provided by the DB vendors, database vendors, and JDBC API is given by Sun Microsystem, or you can say simply by Java. And whenever we use JDBC API in our Java program, then we call that program JDBC program. Look, the problem right here is whenever we are going with JDBC directly through the JDBC API by implementing those interfaces and classes and using that method, then we have to do multiple steps by ourselves in every Java program, or you can say JDBC program. Like to interact with database, first what we do, we built those connector jar files of maybe of Oracle or MySQL into our program. Then we first load the driver class that we built in our program. Then we get the connection, driver manager.get connection. You remember that in JDBC? Then what we do, we prepare the SQL statements by ourselves. And then we create the JDBC statements. Like those are the three statements in JDBC: statement, prepare statement, and callable statement. Then we submit those SQL statement that we created by ourselves in Java program through the JDBC statement in the database. Then we got the result, we process our result. Then we also have to close those resources that we open just right here, connection and statement. So the problem is we have to write these SQL statements and get the connections by ourselves in every program that in which we want to interact with database. So this is the basically problem statement that we have to write these steps again and again. Not only this, we also have to create the table first in our database. Then we are going to insert the data inside those tables through Java program. So what Hibernate says? Hibernate says, don't write these steps again. I will give you better solution for this. Just use couple of methods and you will get rid of these repeating steps. So let's move to another diagram. So this is basically our JDBC program or Java program. We are interacting with JDBC API. JDBC API is contacting with implementation of the driver vendor. Then that implementation inserts our records or maybe fetch those records from the database. So the problem right here is that, like I said, so the problem in Java programs is in JDBC, Java developer is responsible to create table by ourselves in database. Generate primary key. We also have to generate primary key inside the table in our MySQL or Oracle by ourselves, that on which column we want to mention primary key. Loading the driver provided by DB vendors. Remember, we are loading the drivers and also building the drivers first .jar files into our project. Getting the connection. We are getting the connection through driver manager.get connection. Process the resource. Preparing the JDBC statement, prepared statement, callable statement, writing the SQL statement and populating that JDBC statement through by the help of SQL statement. So we write SQL statement that we prepared inside JDBC statement and then pushing that statement into database through multiple methods like update query, execute update. We process our result by ourselves. We clean the resources that we open like connection and statements. We can implement batch updates. So all these steps we have to do again and again, and the main thing is that we have to do these steps by ourselves. So like, what is the difference if we are writing our SQL statement in Java program? Then it is same as we are writing in the command prompt of MySQL and Oracle. So there should be something else when we are making applications and working on Java. So these are the problem statements that we face in our JDBC program or Java program. Java program is in which we use JDBC program is called as not JDBC program, in which we use JDBC API that we call JDBC program. So what is the solution? Hibernate says use the Hibernate APIs in your Java program. In our Java program, we are going to use Java program in which we are going to implement Hibernate APIs. Hibernate implementation. Then we have internal system called HRS, Hibernate Runtime System. What Hibernate Runtime System is going to do? It's by default automatically going to call JDBC API. We don't have to write JDBC programs in our Java. We are going to use some methods from the Hibernate, and that method is going to get decoded by the HRS, Hibernate Runtime System, and the Hibernate Runtime System is going to contact with JDBC API automatically. We don't have to do that. And then JDBC API is going to get implementation of it, maybe of Oracle or MySQL, and those implementation is going to get in touch with database. So is that we don't have to build those connector of MySQL and Oracle .jars in our program. No, we have to do that. But we don't have to write those JDBC program again and again. There are going to couple of things that we will configure, and then all those will get automated by default. So we are going to use Hibernate programs in our Java. Then those Hibernate programs are going to interact with JDBC API through Hibernate Runtime System. So Hibernate Runtime System is responsible to interact with JDBC API, and JDBC API will contact with JDBC implementation of MySQL or Oracle, and then our data will get inserted into the database. So this is what JDBC do, and the problems of JDBC get resolved through the Hibernate. Remember the problems? So these problems are solved. We don't have to do this much of steps again and again. We are just going to use Hibernate implementation and Hibernate runtime system will resolve this much of problems. It will automatically interact with JDBC. Let's see another one. Let's break it down further. So there is one more thing, one more problem that we don't talked about right now. What happens in case of JDBC is we insert data into the database through SQL statements, but that is not going to be case when we are building application, because we are going to work with classes. Classes is going to have properties. So the value that we are going to provide in those properties means variables, methods, constructors, blocks. So we have to work with those properties of a class when we are working with Java. So whatever value we are going to provide in the variables inside a class, that should have to be get inserted into the Java database. So the values that we are going to insert inside the properties of class, inside the variables, that have to be go into database. But here what we do, we write SQL statements and insert those values inside the database. We don't want to do that. So suppose here is a class, customer class. We have some variables, ID, name, string, email, constructor, getter and setters methods. So in code, we are making object of this customer class and providing these values, and these values of a customer class that we provided and on the time of creating the object as an argument have to go inside the database. Not these values that we are going to provide in SQL statements. So this is the another problem statement that Hibernate solves, and this is the main one despite of its other problems. In database, those values have to be inserted that we are going to provide to the variables of some classes. So we make object of this customer class, and we are using this simple method session.save, and we are passing this object reference, and through this reference, just by this line of codes, just by this method session.save, and we are passing this variable, what Hibernate runtime system is going to do, it is going to take this reference variable of object and going to extract the values from this object and create the SQL statement by itself. Runtime system will create the SQL statement automatically. We don't have to create the SQL statement. And through this object, it is going to get these values and populate those SQL statement with these values of the object by itself. This is the task of Hibernate runtime system. It will create the SQL statement and populate those SQL statement with the values coming from the object. Then automatically it passes those things through the JDBC API. JDBC API goes through the implementation of maybe MySQL or Oracle. Then those values will get inserted inside the database. So this is the kind of easiness that Hibernate provides us. We don't have to write SQL statement. We just have to create the class, and inside those class, when we insert the values, Hibernate runtime system is going to take those values from the object and create a SQL statement and populate those SQL statement with these values and pass it automatically inside the database. So this is amazing kind of that how our problems get resolved. Let's go on another diagram. So basically it is also the same. Here is Hibernate runtime system, JDBC API, JDBC implementation and database. We are further elaborating these codes of Hibernate code, that what actually we have to do in order to write the Hibernate code. So here you can see these are the common steps. You know that this you can make the class provide some properties inside the class, and you don't have to do anything in Hibernate runtime system. Inside JDBC API, you also don't have to do anything. You then don't have to do anything inside the JDBC implementation or inside database. So main thing here to learn in Hibernate, that how we are going to configure the Hibernate code, this part only. So Hibernate code, we are dividing this into the further more parts. Here is a class, here is the Hibernate runtime system, JDBC API, implementation of JDBC and database. So we are dividing this part, Hibernate code, into more to understand what actually we have to do inside the Hibernate code part. So we will walk through this elaboration of Hibernate code in next video. So stay tuned.